We made a little political over the science, but hey,
Well,
that's okay. I
well,
have to take on the
you
time.
know what, free energy, the free energy stuff kind of overlays into the politics because that was all part of the suppression, and
It still is.
it still is to a point, right? You know,
Yeah, everything, we're basically disruptors here, okay? And like the anti gravity, I am sure, I'm sure the military has it already. I have no
oh,
doubt
for
in my mind.
sure.
And
When you have an unlimited bank account like the U.S. Navy had, like they still have this unbelievable uh, bank account, and they're siphoning it in black projects. It's being siphoned through the U.S. Federal Reserve, and when was the last time what the U.S. Federal Reserve ever got audited?
yeah,
Never.
I don't think they
Never.
ever do.
Exactly.
But
So
then the military, then they have never passed an audit, and I can never understand that because like when I was in the army, okay, we have a change of command. The guy like a lieutenant, he has to sign for all the equipment in there, and he has to take and have us lay out all of our stuff and make sure you're not missing anything. And so I'm looking at that detail at the ground level where I'm at, and I wonder, well, what happens? When you get to a certain level, all of a sudden all accountability stops, you know, and they don't account for it, you know, and it's just crazy.
yeah, it's just when you have anti-gravity, the implications of what it could do for society, but also the negative stuff, what weaponizing this stuff. That's what they fear the most, is weaponization of this technology, and that's why they've always had a very, very big thumb on top of this in order to keep it hidden. When you have an unlimited bank account, as far as free energy is concerned, that was solved in 1954. It was done, and it was done right here in Toronto by three of the best engineers out of Britain: Bert England, Ian Thomas, and the other guy. Sorry, Ian Thomas, Bert England, and the third one I keep forgetting his name. I'll probably remember in a few minutes. But anyways, they were working in collaboration with Avro back in the 50s.
Yeah, I
And
remember Avro. They had a
yeah,
little flying
so
saucer car.
right, the Avro car. So that was the front. That was the front. That was the one that they were going to release to the media to show everybody, yeah, we were working on high technology stuff for the US government, yada, yada. But that was only the front. That was the smallest of the saucers they actually worked on. They worked on a saucer that was 150 feet in diameter. No one's ever seen it. It was worked on. There was another one slightly smaller, and then the Avrocard, the one that everybody sees on the internet right now. That's the only one that's ever been released. They were working on two other units that dwarfed it in size. So they also had a sister company that worked in collaboration with Avro called DesignX. And that's where Ian Thomas and Bert England worked on this free energy device called the cold heat engine. And they actually they discovered it totally by accident. They had a huge inductor in a tube, coils around it, and it was for a refrigeration system. And what happened was they accidentally dropped a carbon rod down through the center of it. When this happened, the carbon rod started glowing red hot. So you had cold on the outside, but when you put the iron rod, or sorry, the carbon rod in the middle of the assembly, it went extreme hot. So their test results, they spent millions of dollars having third party companies come in and assess the amount of BTUs the amount of power going into the system versus BTUs coming out. Their average result was 150,000 over unity.
Wow.
150,000, not 100,000. So This was done in 1954 when they completed the first prototypes. Other ones were made afterwards, but at that time when Avro was doing, they were working on other projects like nuclear missiles, uh, fuel for long range tactical missiles, a whole bunch of stuff. Anything that a customer came up, they would take on the project. But at that time, ExxonMobil was all over that place. They had their little spies in there, and they were watching everything that was going on. And as soon as they seen that this cold heat engine worked, the funding was pulled. They cut them off because they knew this was going to be a threat to their bottom line. So,
Well, that's only accurate to a point, because what happens is they'll pull the funding to those guys, but then they'll do it internally because they don't really care where the energy comes from as long as they can sell it.
right. So what happened
They'll
was
use it for their anti-gravity, right? So it's like they'll black it out from the public and then develop it, but specifically only for the military purposes, anti-gravitic, and keep it
right.
hidden.
So at the Avro company, at that same time that Energetics was working on this cold heat engine, a lot of people don't know, but Townsend Brown was the head of that project. He was working out of Toronto.
That's where I ran into it, is through the Townsend Brown work.
Yeah.
And here's something you should think about. The military doesn't really do a whole lot with NASA anymore, and they kind of pulled out of it. And but the military never sees the high ground, and I am sure, I just feel in my bones that they probably have some kind of space station at one of the Lagrange points. Okay, and they have the anti-gravity, because when I was a senior in high school back in the 80s, early 80s, okay, or college rather, the Air Force would sponsor the IEEE, okay, and they took us all to different places. And one of the recruiters gave me all these posters to pass out. And it was Space Force 2001, and it had a picture of the Aurora, but no one knew it was the Aurora at that time. But I passed them all out, and a couple weeks later, he says, "Hey, those posters I gave you? What did you do with them?" I said, "Well, I gave them all around." He said, "Oh, that was a mistake. That was classified." So so I know they're a good 30, 40 years at least minimum ahead of us, because the stuff that
I would say they're well beyond that. I'd say they're 100 years.
Yeah.
And I'm being conservative on that.
Well, I was giving a tour. Our class was giving a tour. The IEEE guys. We were giving a tour of the Kirkland there back in 84, and at that time they had just figured out how to counteract the atmosphere fluctuations for the lasers. Okay, using ring lasers, and they just got through that, and they had on the plane. We got to see the plane and everything right there. And Kirkland, that was in 84. And now that's supposed to be the hottest thing out there and everything. And you look at all these new laser-based anti-drone equipment they're coming out with. Yeah.
Right. One other interesting note is back in the First World War, going into the Second World War, the military was building all these battleships. Okay. Huge battleships with these huge armor plating. And they had to come up with a way of welding these giant armor plating on the sides of these battleships, but faster. So they came up with a method where they would get the two plates together, they would fill it up with flux, and they would have a room full of capacitors. And what they would do is they would electroshock the two plates with a huge amount of electricity and basically weld them together. So this is where it gets a little interesting. As they were doing this, the workers around, they had to clear the room before they would do this shock of the two plates. So all the workers would have to get up and go to a safe area so they can do this shocking technique. and they would leave the odd screwdriver or bolts on the ground, and tools. They would just randomly leave tools near the site where the weld is going to take place. Well, what started to happen was when they blasted it with the electrical energy, all the tools started disappearing. They started vanishing.
So similar to the Philadelphia experiment supported reaction.
So what happened was the tool handlers started accusing the workers of stealing the tools. And they said, no, we left it right where our workstation is. But after you guys welded the part together, my tools are missing. So they decided to set up high-speed cameras in the area. So they would set up little pedestals and they would put some bolts on there and maybe a screwdriver and stuff. And then they do the same shocking weld technique, and boom, all the stuff on the pedestals mysteriously disappeared. So right after that happened, they stopped that procedure. That whole thing went into a black project, which Townsend Brown was part of.
Yeah.
So interesting. And I think that's where a lot of
this led to the Philadelphia experiment
down the road. Yeah. And Tesla got involved in, and Tesla was only involved in the Philadelphia experiment for about 3 or 4 months. And he knew the dangers involved. He expressed his concerns to the military guys, and they proceeded anyways. And Tesla said, I wouldn't have any of this. I know what's going to happen, and it's going to not be a good ending for a lot of innocent military men. And he left the project. So you had all the guys that worked on the Manhattan Project. A couple of the top engineers were working on the Philadelphia experiment. And they proceeded with, even knowing that Tesla said, bad stuff's going to happen if you have humans on the ship when they do these experiments. And sure enough, they had a catastrophic failure, and a lot of these sailors died. So
there's a lot of stuff. They mentioned Phil Schneider, one of the, I think it was Amilcar mentions Phil Schneider. For those who are interested, I do have some Phil Schneider material on the YouTube channel there. So you might want to check it out. I knew Phil Schneider
present at any of your conferences, Steve?
And not mine. He was at the Global Sciences, and I was at the Global Science Conference he was supposed to speak at, but he was killed the weekend before the conference. So,
oh wow,
yeah, they want to call it suicide, but it's kind of hard to be a suicide when you stab yourself. I mean, come on.
So as far as like the technology back then, I think there's a very tight knit as far as anti-gravity and also interdimensional travel. I think they go hand in hand. And I think they were figuring this out in the early 1900s that, teleportation and anti-gravity, they're tight knit. There's correlations between the two technologies. So, and that's why a lot of it went black really early, right?
Well, that's also the Air Force left NASA because when they develop stuff under NASA, it becomes public property. Okay, it's,
right.
And by doing it as a military within the military itself, you don't have to release that information. So that's one of the reasons they left.
As far as I understood, when the space shuttle program was on, they had over 25 missions that were completely military and were classified. You would just see the headline on the news. Oh, space shuttle is going up, military mission. They can't talk about it. Done. And that was it. You didn't hear about it. So what were they sending up there?
I actually worked on the space shuttle.
Yeah. I seen the space shuttle when I was in California at the museum.
Worked on it.
The aviation museum in downtown LA. Took a tour through there, so I was able to see the space shuttle close up. I walked underneath it and walked up. They had a display of the engines and everything.
what my company did was the seats, and my job was to destroy them, break them, you know,
Right.
and and that's what I did, and we put stress us and strain gauges on them, to measure them electrically, and then I proceed to try to break them in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know that they built an extra set of everything. And they could have had another shuttle, and when the government canceled that shuttle, the aeronautic companies, like Lockheed and Rockwell and that, wanted to go ahead and build it themselves, but the FAA would never let them approve that. But now you look at, they let Elon Musk go out there and do whatever he wants, with old technology, which is destroying the environment.
Yeah, exactly. They got to start trickling this stuff out, because those rockets are extremely polluting to the atmosphere. Like,
And then they throw all those satellites up and destroy your view.
Yeah,
of the night sky.
that too. All the space trash that's up there right now. It's like we're littering the outer atmosphere of our planet.
I mean, it's like they're trying to keep the people from down here being able to study the stars anymore, because you have to differentiate between all that.
Yeah, you have to go far away from the city to actually get a full view of the sky. Like, you have to go into an area where it's completely isolated. When I was up in Bernie's neck of the woods there at nighttime, I was in Canmore, BC, and
Canmore still Alberta, but yes.
Yeah. So, at nighttime, the amount of stars I could see at nighttime were just breathtaking. And, in Toronto, you can't see that. They're all blocked out. You cannot see the sky.
Right? Yeah, the mountains are pretty good. When I was driving from Albuquerque, New Mexico, after Tesla Tech to Duchesne, Utah, for the Moon Lake Gathering event, driving through Navajo Nation at night, that was something else. You could totally just see the full Milky Way and everything. And well, then I tried CE5 again, and something did appear, but that's a story for another day.
Anyway, I'm gonna have to call it quits now here pretty shortly, but you're gonna be here on again next week, right, Mike? You know what you're gonna be talking about?
Yep. Yeah, well, we usually it's like a round table as every week, and
so I think Nathan and Joe are going to present their stuff. He's talking about on his show, Mike, not on our weekly show. But if you're coming back to present, I think you'll present on your builds and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. We'll let Nathan do his thing next week, and then after that,
And the people who want to watch the Extraordinary League of Inventors, how do they get a hold of that channel?
Yeah, just go into YouTube and type @Faraday Research, and you'll see my channel show up there, and you can follow what I'm up to and my projects. And I also got the live tab there, so you can see all the shows that we have done for the last few years, the early days with me and Bernie starting off and getting things going. And both of us have some really good content on both of our channels. And
And do you have a website or?
No, I just basically use the YouTube channel as my main front. I might be working on. I was thinking about getting a website going. I'm still kind of debating if it's worth it or just keep the YouTube channel. I'm on Rumble as well, so I have my presence on Rumble. So I've also downloaded all my archives. I have copies of all my content. So if right now I'm being shadow banned, like really bad right now, like bad, like this is the worst I've been shadow banned so far. So
I'm sorry. It might have to do with being associated with my channel, and they haven't let me gain a subscriber in 5 years. It's wild, but it's what it is. It means we're doing something right.
Yeah, they're squeezing me pretty tight right now, but I've been trying to fight it off with the algorithm. So I'm trying to put out a lot of shorts and stuff like that to kind of counteract that algorithm and get me moving again.
Well, Rumble don't pay anything, do they?
Rumble, I just want my presence on there, so I do post videos on there, so people, don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, right? So,
Well, one of the things I do is let me bring this up. If you go to my website, you see this little yellow box here, and then here I have a conference directory and a speaker directory, and so I can link. There I can have all the conferences listed, and I have a link to each conference playlist. The same thing with the speakers, and that's what I'm working on. So that's where it would be nice to have like at least a one pager there to set some kind of directions for that kind of stuff, and then you're not dependent on their stuff to take people there.
Yeah. Well, the advantage you have over us is you've been at it a lot longer. I didn't really start. I started making HHO generators in 2001. So that was kind of my first taste of the free energy stuff. So you've got a little bit of a head start on me, to say the least.
I started in 1984 doing this with the Tesla side and was the president for a lot of years, but I left them in 97, and I've written this. I started writing web pages back in the mid 90s by hand, and all my stuff is by hand. I don't use any of these editors and that. I don't. I don't know how to use them, or I don't trust them.
Yeah, I used to do all my websites longhand in HTML.
Yeah,
and that's how I learned how to web design, the old-fashioned way. But I know how to use the new tools and getting pretty good at it. So
I don't like them because it's like the AI stuff. They try to put you in a box, and but they go to all AI. What are people going to do? And the more AI does for you, the less you know. And I think it's a way of dumbing down America. So, but anyway, I'll be checking with y'all next week and everything.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
We'll
Thanks for appreciate
thanks for having us on.
And I want to remind everyone, tomorrow's the 15th. Our DVDs are still available at the $100 off thing. So get hold of me, 520-252-0374. And I'll see y'all next week.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Thanks for being. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks.
Try this thing out. I need to get me